it doesn't matter sort of the child that you have in the, like when you first start out, there's hope for every single child. And you'll see that as, as you listen to what I'm saying. So my mother passed away in 2012. And then I conceived Rose in early 2013. And 2011, sorry, my mum passed away. Sorry, apologies. And then I conceived Rose early 2013. So my body was in a very, very, very bad way. And I didn't actually know I was pregnant. So we went to a spa and I sat in a sauna for God knows how long. I drank loads of alcohol. I ate all the wrong foods and did all that stuff because I didn't even know I was pregnant. I was heavily grieving my mum as well. And so my body was just completely depleted anyway. And then I found out I was pregnant. And Dean and I had only been together for like 6 months. And so I was like petrified, and my whole pregnancy was very stressful. And these things are important, and we don't realize that sort of as we're going through. One thing that I've learned since is that I am a really high copper person. And so my mum had schizophrenia, and that was sort of led to some of the things in terms of her death. And my dad had mental health diagnoses also and was on medication daily for that. And their parents had mental health issues also. So the biochemistry that came down to me was already quite messy. And so I had really high copper levels in my blood, and I didn't know this. And then when I got pregnant, I was very, very unwell. And when I say, and hopefully this will help somebody out there that feels like this also, because there is a biochemical imbalance here. This isn't that you're abnormal or like something's wrong with you. When I was pregnant, I was mentally unwell. To a point where the anger and aggression and the emotional side of it was so bad that Dean didn't know. He'd ring his mum like crying and stuff and be like, what is going on with this woman? Like, she's completely turned into this psychopath overnight, like getting pregnant. And it's because in your pregnancy, your copper levels rise by double. So if you're already really high in copper levels, it sends you insane essentially. And that's what it did to me. So anyway, I went through this pregnancy, lots of stress. I lost my job while I was going through pregnancy. So that was another big stressor. I had to drive for like 3 hours into London to get to work. So probably was a blessing in disguise. And so anyway, there was a lot of stress in my pregnancy. Then Rose was born, and my labour was 3 days long. So I went into labour on the Monday at 2 a.m. and then she wasn't born until 10:30 a.m. on the Wednesday. And the reason I'm telling you all this is because all of this is relevant in the sort of back history of what happens with the child when they have a load. And if you think about Rose at that point, she already had biochemistry that was completely distorted from all the sort of, mental health diagnoses of my family that we'd sort of that she's predisposed to. Then we had the copper, and then this birth was horrifying to the point where I was out of it. I had an epidural, I was induced. All these things can impact, a human body. And then when we got to actually trying to give birth, it wasn't happening. And actually my dilation went backwards, and they were like, this is like unheard of. This never happens. And she just wouldn't come out, like she wouldn't be born. And what I understand now, learning from Lara, is that actually she was delayed from that time because her body and her brain hadn't formed the connections to actually know how to be born. So she wasn't ready, and she was already 9 days late at that point. And anyway, so then she ended up having to be delivered via forceps. It's actually quite upsetting because she came out, she didn't cry. And obviously it was my firstborn and I was completely out of it and mentally deranged at this point. So when she was born, I didn't really know anything about what was meant to happen with a newborn baby. But all we saw was that because she'd been ripped out by forceps because her heart rate had gone so low because I'd been in labour for like 3 days, her head was just black and blue and her eyes were all sort of puffy. It was awful. Like she looked so like beaten up. Anyway, and then that was sort of like, the first, that was like her first, that was an insight into sort of everything that happened before she even sort of came into the world. Anyway, Rose really struggled to feed, and I found just parenting in general. So this is like quite deep and sort of bearing my soul, and I hope it helps somebody out there who may have felt like this also. But I really, really struggled with severe mental health after Rose was born, to a point where, you know, I was in a really, really bad place. I remember Dean's family coming over and I just started bawling my eyes out, and they were like, okay, we'll go. You know, it's so awkward. And anyway, yeah, I just felt really alone and sort of overwhelmed with having this newborn that I didn't really know what to do with. And that sounds awful now, because I know, you know, parenting is my favourite thing and I love being a mum now. But back then I struggled so deeply. And anyway, so then Rose continued along this trajectory of, she was this beautiful, happy baby. And it was so funny because she would just draw the room in. It was like we'd go around the supermarket and her mouth was so wide with smiles. And that's why I think for us with autism, which I'll talk to you about and how that unfolded, it never was a thing in the early stages for us, because she was this child. I mean, I didn't know what autism was anyway, to be honest. I'd never really heard of it apart from on Rain Man, and he was really intelligent, and I didn't, you know, that's all you sort of hear about when you don't know. And then this baby that was just so beautiful and happy and smiley, and it was just gorgeous. And then, but she was behind, but I didn't know because I just didn't know anything. So Rose never rolled over. And I remember Dean's mum always saying, because she'd had 3 kids, and she was like, oh, has she done this yet? Is she doing this yet? And I think she didn't want to like be too like overbearing as a mother-in-law, but she knew that there was something that was amiss, and I was oblivious, and I was still quite mentally unwell as well. So I think that I sort of didn't really understand or know or really notice even, or have awareness. And then, so she didn't roll over. She didn't like, you know, grab out for things. And that's what babies typically do when they get to like 6 months or something. Like, you put something in front of her and she'd sort of just be looking at it, still smiling, but, you know, and none of that sort of independent behaviour. And her head was really floppy as well. I remember it got to sort of, I think she was about 10 months, and we'd still have to put a cushion behind her. And if we, you know, if that was taken away, or someone didn't know and they put her down, if they'd been holding her, she would just flop back and fall backwards. And obviously that would lead to her hitting her head and things like that. And that was horrendous. And obviously we'd have to like warn everyone, and you're so in fight or flight. And everything I've learned from Lara now about those first stages is so important, because she just didn't do anything. She didn't hit any of the milestones or do anything that a baby's supposed to do to form neural pathways as she developed. And then it got to, with crawling, she never crawled. So she would just drag a leg behind. And this is all relevant in Lara's work, because all of this stuff, if we know this at this age, I mean, if I'd met Lara then, I could have helped Rose a lot in those early stages, because all of those developmental milestones we could have integrated at that point. But obviously I didn't.